Hello, my name's Zach. I'll be presenting my opportunities and issues analysis on the site of Lake Eildon for my thesis. Currently, we're looking at EVC 47, a site overlooking Collar Bay, and this is Valley Grassy Forest, which is an endangered EVC. 94% of it was cleared since invasion, and of the remaining 6%, 88% of that is located on private land. So it's quite a precious resource, and also serves as habitat to a number of endangered, vulnerable and threatened species. So powerful owl, brush-tailed phascogale, swift parrot, spotted tree frog, and white-belly sea eagle, to name a few, all sort of rely on this habitat. Just to contextualize how I'm framing the site, the major event in the history since invasion of this site was the damming, the constructed dam wall in the 1950s. It was primarily done as a resource for agricultural irrigation, and now also has a secondary use for water sports and recreation and fishing, which provides a lot of financial support to the town of Eildon and surrounding towns as well. So as a result of this, obviously, massive changes to ecological functions and hydrological functions. I'm kind of viewing this site as like a highly sort of constructed and synthetic environment. The other sort of thing to point out is that the camping grounds that were built on the national park during the 1950s are sort of starting to wear down and are in need of sort of replacement or some kind of repair. And any kind of interventions along these lines should recognize, these kinds of changes over time and be sensitive to the ecologies that have evolved and adapted to this kind of massive infrastructure. My thesis statement responds to the forthcoming development of Lake Eildon and the potential environmental consequences stemming from increased tourism-based activity. Sustainable design approach will be prioritised through the investigation of locally sourced materials to create an intervention framework. Primary goal is to mitigate environmental impacts at critical points of interaction between humans and the environment, thus acting as a mediating force between economic development and the preservation of natural resources. An examination of the overlap between human fields of behaviour and ecological processes will be used to explore the interventions at strategic areas identified in the site for their vulnerability to human impacts. Proposed outcomes will harmonise outdoor activities with minimal ecological disruption with the ultimate goal of a synergetic system. A holistic and sustainable model for small-scale interventions to assist in Lake Eildon's development will not only foster economic security for its community, but also ensure the long-term protection of one of Victoria's most important water resources. The framework will serve as a reference for similar towns across Australia for methods of working within environmental systems in a simplified and pragmatic way. So to kind of visualize what I'm sort of talking about there, I'm looking at the aquatic ecology of the site, the terrestrial, and also the fields of human behaviour that intersect with those. So you're jet skiing and fishing and also hiking, using the campsites for a range of activities, and anywhere that kind of intersects with an ecological sort of process, whether it be habitat or spawning of fish, reproduction, migration, any of these things. I'm just trying to take a kind of a simplified approach and see how that might interact with a field of human behaviour and how we could get these to work in sort of more of a more harmonious way. So yeah, in terms of the kind of overarching large-scale trends of the site, we've got land clearing, and this is also occurring in a dry climate, which is contributing to soil erosion and bank destabilization. So it's quite a sloping site, and this kind of combined land clearing and the drier climate has caused significant erosion around the perimeter of the lake, but also at various pinch points around the site. We've got pollution primarily from industry and agriculture. So we're getting a lot of runoff in the lake, which frequently has algal blooms once the weather picks up in the spring and the summer. We've also got the obvious interruption to the hydrological flows of the site, which has considerably altered the ecologies, but also has like very tangible, visible impacts of these kind of ad hoc drainage solutions, which I witnessed on site just walking around and a couple of the walking trails. And also the issue of soil compaction through heavy foot traffic, and also changing camping practices from back in the 1950s when cars and tenting sort of operations are a lot smaller. We're now seeing much larger vehicles and camping sort of caravans and setups that have disrupted this site over time, leading to the compaction of soil, which then inhibits trees from establishing their roots properly, so that when there's a big sort of dumping of rain, they're seeing lots of trees being uprooted. This is just a page looking at some of the issues that I found to be most prevalent in the site and could be addressed. So looking at ways of litter and pollution, managing soil erosion, wildlife disturbance in any kind of way. So, whether that be through the use of walking tracks and I guess laying down infrastructure, using campfires and that kind of process obviously also presents some opportunities for some intervention. And another sort of area that I was interested in was, the shared use of camping areas and how we could present less threats to ecological functions at night. Also looking at fire hazards primarily through use of campfires and cooking on site, invasive species and biosecurity, and also the drainage of the site. How could it be improved to mitigate that kind of issue of soil erosion that I mentioned before? And with this, I'm also looking at potential unforeseen sort of opportunities. So, could this algae bloom that's recurring, could that be used as a kind of a resource? Or the fallen trees that we saw in the previous slide, how are these things that are perceived to be waste or an issue, how could they be utilized in a design intervention? Some areas that I'm looking at, these are all existing site condition photos. So installation of bridges and crossings, walkways and footpaths, culverts and drainage solutions, which are sort of being tacked on the campsite grounds themselves, and also the stabilization of the walking trails, which are eroding through the drainage issue. So also amenities and facilities, the boat ramps, which are relatively they're kind of being used well, but they're not particularly ecologically sensitive. And I also included these images of some ad hoc solutions by mountain bikers throughout the site, which is a kind of a popular area. And they're kind of using the environment around them and the tools that they have to improvise some solutions, which I find to be inspirational. In terms of the terrestrial ecology, my kind of analysis has been revolving around looking at the slope and identifying areas where that intersects with the walking track, which you can see highlighted in the dashed white line. So they obviously sort of follow the flattest areas of the topography, but they inevitably sort of intersect. So anywhere where we see this sort of yellow red shaded area, these could be potentially, without having to introduce largest, like kind of more engineered solutions, there's kind of an opportunity there to try and stabilize the bank and or perhaps divert water through those areas in some way. So on the topic of water, we're also looking at sort of the drainage of the site. So I created a flow accumulation map just to see anywhere where these kind of drain lines would intersect with the walking path, which is highlighted in blue. So these are kind of presenting opportunities where we see a lot of these ad hoc solutions with culverts and draining pipes being tacked on, but maybe there's an opportunity for a more considered approach there. So an example of the kind of approach that I'd like it to take is this digital structures project by MIT, which utilizes the kind of inherent functional strength of tree forks in building structures. Another one is TechMat. So this is looking at erosion control, and it's just simply using recycled paper and a sort of a folded structural component to fix seeds and plants into the ground and provide a bit of stabilization to eroding banks. In the aquatic ecology, I'm looking at this the way that the site is sort of draining out onto the shoreline, which is it highlighted in the blue, where anywhere where the purple dots intersect the blue line is kind of showing that area. So quite a number of opportunities on site, and is this water kind of being could it be collected or filtered to reduce pollution or its effect on the shoreline? Also highlighted the boat ramps there, which I think will be a major sort of site to look at in terms of ecological impacts and how that sort of interface between humans and the kind of animals and plants that occur in these sites could be better sort of bolstered and working together to create a sort of better outcome for both parties. So here's an example from Reef Design Lab, which kind of using sort of lower fi solutions to provide habitat, and I guess it's just a great example of showing, even potentially inert and recycled materials becoming alive and providing, like a more sort of ecologically conscious infrastructure. And on a larger scale, projects from Scape such as Oyster Texture and Living Breakwaters, just being more sort of responsive and bioavailable to the ecosystems around them. So looking at issues of wave action mitigation and just any kind of infrastructure being introduced here has been really kind of considered from a point of view of how can it be responsive to the animals and plants that live there. That's all for my presentation, and thanks for watching.